Some of the implications around this, the learnings from the model, then show the following, that the direct benefits that we were gaining from productivity, reduced retention risks, etc., paid for about 80% of the overall project cost. So we were almost getting trained, highly skilled, productive electricians and mechanics for free. That's a pretty significant impact on the business. Some of the effectiveness factors, we don't have all, well, the other thing we learned, we don't have all the right information to populate the model as well as we'd like to. And so we're identifying some of the key variables or the performance indicators that we do need to track going forward so that we can improve the resolution and understanding of what the model's telling us. The indirect value is very significant because it's a commitment that the company's made with the community. We commit to you to hire you. We commit to you to train you. And that's a promise we've made, and that creates the indirect value to us, which helps us manage that risk around community-company interactions. Another example that I'll point to is the Newmont Development Foundation. This is a community development foundation that was set up with agreement between the company and the community, and the company committed to $1 per ounce of gold produced and 1% of net profits going into this foundation to execute the development objectives of the community itself. So we wanted to really understand, well, how does this create value, or how does this help us protect value of the company? And this was a little bit more challenging to understand. Why? Because it's about relationships, and it's even longer term looking. And the dividends and the value that's delivered is really long term. Some of the value drivers here that were obvious were we could spend less money on community development ourselves as a company because we're pushing it through the foundation. We've already made a commitment. So we're not double dipping, if you will. And that's a gentle transition. As the foundation becomes more effective, we can start spending less through our own programs that the foundation then can become more effective at delivering. Reduced security costs, we talked about that. And the other one that is an uncertainty is around closure and the exit strategy for the mine. And I think we put that on there because it's important for us to understand there is a role that the foundation will have. Do we understand what that is yet? No. But we need to understand what that is and start to drive some synergies around how the foundation can help in the exit strategy from the social perspective when that mine closes in 20 years. So again, the purpose of this slide is just to demonstrate some of the different value drivers that we identified as we went through this process. Not all these are going to apply to everybody, to every mine, to every scenario, and it's really the exercise of working together in this cross-functional team with the facilitator that we heard about earlier and finding out what the drivers are that are meaningful to your scenario. And they're not all the same. So that's a very important process to go through. The implications on this, the direct benefits offset about half of the cost of the foundation. But we see an awful lot of indirect benefit because this is the relationship, this is expectation management with stakeholders. And so we still have to get better about how we can measure that indirect value and how we understand and validate some of these assumptions. And that's the work ahead of us. And we expect as well that these value drivers in terms of the foundation are going to change. They're going to change as the effectiveness of that foundation builds, as the credibility of that foundation builds. And we're going to have to figure out how to adjust the value drivers relative to that change in effectiveness. So what are some of our takeaways, challenges, and next steps? We've heard a lot of this discussion earlier, that the process, the dialogue, the engagement that we get across the business is really amazing. And it's fundamental to the process. And if you can't get the dialogue, the engagement across the organization, then there's no value to this. And so you must have that participation and engagement to get the true value out of the process. And I think the process is really the value. The NPV number that comes out the other end maybe or maybe not, it may or may not be meaningful. The business dialogue, we talked about that. We need to have the functions speaking the same language, and I think this is a great platform to help enable that dialogue to happen. It helps our community development people understand the importance of identifying value drivers and the logic behind why you do what you do. We don't just go out and do things because they're fun to do. There should be a reason why we're doing it, and we need to be able to better articulate that to the business. Some of the challenges that we had. This is a pilot, and we all understand that pilots take time, and there's a lot of uncertainty of what you're going to find as you go through a pilot, and that's part of the process, and that's part of the commitment to participate. But I would say that it did take a long time for us to go through it. Design reasons, for participation reasons, distance, lots of things, but it takes time. The cross-functional engagement, pivotal, talked about that. Data availability and verification, very important in communicating with your finance teams. Before any number comes out of the model, they want to check it again, and check it again. And after 4 times, they still don't want that number to come out because they're not sure. That's just the nature of the dialogue. But it's an important step to be able to build credibility and engage that group to have rigor around how we validate numbers, and they want to participate in that process. Changing culture. We talked about the journey that we're on. Well, changing business culture is part of that journey. And I think that we have to recognize that it happens at different rates of speed in different organizations and different operations. And so be attentive to that, because if you push too hard to get output from the model, you may lose participation through that journey. And I think that's a very important thing to remember, is participation engagement through the process is number one. And that's what creates the value. Some of the next steps, we want to figure out now how to integrate this model into our business process within Newmont, specifically at Ahafo. We know the value at Ahafo. The rest of Newmont is kind of watching to see how it works. But we want to try to integrate this into our business planning process, into our budgeting process, so that the model and our business process can speak together and integrate so that we're not duplicating efforts. And that's something that the team at Ahafo is going to work on in 2012 as we come into the budgeting cycle. And then we want to look at the outcomes for broader Newmont, and how can we take this pilot and some of the learnings and experience we have and see if and how it applies to us as an organization. And those are things that we're also looking at through some of our learning networks within Newmont. So with that, I appreciate everybody's attention, and we're going to listen to Kojo, who's our external affairs manager at Ahafo, and he was kind of my counterpart on the ground there, who was trying to rally people and bring people together around the table to have this discussion. He did a great job, and he was very, very critical to the success of our pilot.